Hi, I'm Robin Prospect. I'm a holistic coach. The purpose of this video is to help you to relate more healthily to the different parts of yourself. We'll go through the sections in my online guide to parts work, which are prepare, set context, resource, relate, and reflect. Feel free to pause the video whenever you need a little bit more time on any of the sections. So to prepare, you need to set aside some time in which you'll be uninterrupted and make sure you're in a space that's quiet and where you feel safe. If you find writing helpful to your process, then have a journal to hand or something else to write on. So we're moving on to setting context. This is about identifying the situation you want to work with and the parts that are involved and alive in relation to the situation. If this is the first time you've done parts work, I recommend choosing a situation which doesn't have a lot of emotional charge to it, just so that you can get used to the process and you can start to understand your own capacity to be with your emotions. So good situations might be somewhere where you feel a bit stuck or where you have a decision to make and there are different parts of you that feel different ways. So once you have your situation, we're going to see who's in the room, which parts are here. Without digging too deep, and perhaps with your journal to hand, see if you can identify the different ways you feel about this situation. So these parts might show up as thoughts that you have in your head. They might be emotions, they might be mental images, or physical sensations, or any combination of these. I like to write in bullet points. I have a part that thinks or feels this way, or there is a part that thinks or feels this way, and just write a list. If you begin to feel that there are relationships between the parts, you can make a diagram or a map, whatever seems to work well for you to get an idea of who's here. In relation to each of the parts, you may want to see if you can identify whether they are protector parts or hurt parts. So generally, we like to identify which of these two parts we're dealing with because they like to be related to in different ways. Protector parts are the parts of us who manage our day-to-day experience. They do this so that they can protect us from feeling the hurt that is held in the hurt parts. Protector parts may be the kinds of parts who help you to plan your day, let you know who to get close to and who not to get close to. They may be the parts that you would feel as an inner critic or an inner judge. They're not always kind to us, but they are always doing this in order to protect us. The hurt parts, on the other hand, are the parts that hold strong emotion. They're parts that came into being when we were young, usually, when we were faced with a situation that was so overwhelming for us, for our systems at that very young age, that we put away that hurt somewhere where we didn't have to feel it at the time because it was just too much for us. So when you're in contact with a hurt part, you'll really feel strong emotion. The protector parts are there to help us to judge when it's right to feel those hurt parts. So now you have a good idea of the situation and the parts who are involved. We'll move on to resourcing ourselves. This is probably the most important part of the whole process. In order to build relationships with our parts, we have to do that from a place of presence. That is a place where we're connected to our own inner resources, the resources where we are calm, we are confident, we're wise, we're strong. All of these things we have access to, but we need to make sure we have access to them in the present moment so that our parts feel safe enough to come into connection with us. So this is the process that I normally use with my clients and with myself, but if you find something else works better for you, then it's a really lovely thing to experiment with. So it's a bit of a mini meditation, and I'll talk us through. So first of all, just connecting to your sit bones, connecting to the points of contact with the seat and with the floor. Just noticing you're here right now. And keeping your eyes open just to begin with, start to look around the space that you're in. Just slowly moving your neck from side to side, your head from side to side. This is helping to stimulate the vagus nerve, which takes us into our parasympathetic nervous system, helping us to feel calm and connected. And allow your eyes to stop on something in your space. And when you found something, just pay attention to the shape of that object, the color, the texture, the light and the shadow, just picking up as many details as you can. And then moving on to a second object, doing the same thing. And this is sending a signal to your parts, to your whole being, that you're here now in the present moment, that you're safe. So then closing your eyes, come into connection with your felt experience and scan your body for somewhere which feels grounded. Could be quite a neutral sensation, doesn't need to be pleasant, but something that feels safe right now. Maybe your sit bones, maybe your hands. At this point, if you're struggling to find somewhere in your experience that feels safe, you have two options. You can either open your eyes and use an external anchor, noticing when you look at that thing that it makes you feel safe and present. Or, if that's not working for you, then your time will be best spent just trying to come into connection with the present moment, exercising that muscle of coming into presence. That's an incredibly valuable thing to do, even if you don't get any further than that in this process today. Assuming you have somewhere, whether it's an internal anchor or an external anchor, just rest your attention there for a few breaths. Notice what that's like. You might say to yourself, I feel grounded here. Notice any sensations, perhaps solidity, perhaps a sense of here-ness. And just making yourself a mental blueprint that you can go back to. So feel free to pause the video and spend as long as you like with this anchor. So the way in which we'll use the presence anchor in the rest of the process is to help us to regulate the amount of emotion that we connect to. There's a concept called the window of tolerance, and we want to be staying within that. Below the window of tolerance is a collapsed state, and above the window of tolerance is a hyper-arousal fight or flight state. We want to stay within the window of tolerance so that as we connect to our parts, we're really able to feel what they need us to feel and to process those emotions. So if you feel yourself moving to the edge of the window of tolerance, that's the time to pause, to connect with your presence anchor, and spend as long as you need there to return yourself to a feeling of being regulated and safe. So with that anchor to hand, we're going to move into the next section, which is relating to our parts. So first of all, you need to choose a part to relate to. And don't worry too much about this decision, because if another part needs your attention more, it will let you know. But generally, we're working with the part that feels most urgent in need of your attention. And in particular, if you have any parts that feel fear, that's always a part to turn to first. We need to work with one part at a time, just because this is a relationship building process and parts need our one-to-one attention. However, I just want to note that often we'll have polarized parts. That is, one part that wants us to go this way and one part that wants us to go that way. As if you had two children who were arguing with each other, you need to spend time with each of those in turn, roughly equal amount of time. So still being with one part at a time, but making sure you turn from one part to the other on a fairly regular basis so that they feel you're treating them fairly. And here I just want to say that I'm using this parent metaphor, and it is actually quite a useful way to think about relating to your parts, as if you are the wise parent who has a whole family of children who need our attention, our care, and our understanding. So choosing the focal part that feels like it needs your attention the most, we're now going to go into a process which is quite an internal process, and very often it's best done with eyes closed. So turning towards your focal part, first of all, notice how you feel contact with this part. It might be that this part is a particular thought that's in your mind. It might have an emotional significance, a physical sensation, an image, or a combination of these things. Just really tune in to how this focal part is showing up for you. And then treat these sensations as if they're representing the part as you go forward. So first of all, saying something that helps this focal part to feel welcome. Something like, hello, X part, you're welcome here. I'd love to get to know you better. And I want to say here that it can be useful to give parts names. So it could be something like, hello, critical part, or hello, sad part. And then just notice if that part is still present for you after you've welcomed it. And then a really important question to ask yourself now is, can you be with this part without wanting to change it? So this is a check whether there are any other parts hanging around you have an opinion about this part. When you're relating to the part from your own presence, your presence is capable of being with any of your parts without wanting to change them. And that's really important to this relationship building process. Our parts want to feel seen and understood by us, and loved and valued. Any kind of agenda for change will bring up resistance. So ask yourself now, when you're in contact with this focal part, how do I feel about this part? Can I be with this part without wanting to change it? And you may well at this point notice that other parts show up. We call these concerned parts. They're parts that have an opinion about the focal part. It might be a part that has some judgment, a part that feels really sad. And sometimes there are subtle parts that come up who really want to fix the focal part or make it feel better. It's really important to notice that this is also a change agenda. It's not a bad thing to notice concerned parts. It just helps us to get a better idea of the situation. But if you have a concerned part, then you need to create some space so that you can come back to relate to the focal part without that extra presence. So to do that, we turn towards the concerned part and we ask the part to give us space. So it might look something like this. I see there's a sad part here. Acknowledging that sadness. Would you be willing to give me space so that I can relate to this focal part? You can stay where you are, you can watch what happens, but I need some time to relate to this part without your influence. And then we wait and we see if that part is willing to give us that space or not. If not, it's really not a problem. All that's telling us is that the concerned part actually needs our attention more than the focal part. So we simply turn towards the concerned part at that point and we act like this is the new focal part. So sometimes you may spend the whole session just mapping out different parts who need your attention, and that's really okay. It can take several sessions to actually build relationships enough with any of these parts so that they can start to feel more safe, they can start to relax with you. And in the meanwhile, you're building up a really good understanding of your internal landscape. I'm now going to go on to relating more deeply with a part, whatever part that ends up being for you today. So how we'll relate to our focal part depends on whether it's a protector part or a hurt part, as they need to be related to in different ways. So protector parts work really hard for us, and they do an important job to help us from feeling the intense emotions of the hurt parts. What they really want is to feel seen and understood in the job that they're doing and loved and valued for that job. When they feel that way, they will eventually melt away and allow us to relate directly to the hurt parts. So I'll talk through the protector part first, and then I'll talk through the hurt part, so you can manage your viewing of the video according to which type of part you're working with. If your focal part is a protector part, so just checking that you have that contact, and I'm also checking, can I feel myself? Can I feel the parts? That part is still available for you. Just ask that part how it's doing today. And with all of these questions, you're dropping a question in, and rather than going up to your mind for an answer, you're just allowing space to see what arises. I like to think of it as listening, but with my whole being. And the answer may be in words, or it may not. Maybe in the form of some physical sensation, or anything else. Whatever comes up from the part, reflect it back to the part to really help the part to feel that you're listening. So that could look something like this. I'm really getting that you're feeling quite tense about this situation. I can really feel some tension around my diaphragm. And then proceed with this part, just asking open questions to understand what the part is doing for you, understand the job it's doing. So you might say something like, what job is it that you do for me? And again, just listening openly. As you go through, you may want to be just jotting notes down in your journal. That's fine too. And whatever you learn from the part, just reflect back to the part so that the part knows that you're hearing it. Again, the primary role of this whole process is to build a relationship with your parts. Like building a relationship with your children, at the moment your parts think they're very much on their own, that they have to do these jobs with no support from someone wiser than they are. By building a relationship, they suddenly know that they're not on their own, that actually you're there. You're there to provide presence so that they don't have to struggle and suffer so much. So you can spend as long as you like in this process just finding out from the part what it is that the part does for you, why it does that. You could ask a question such as, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this job? Once you feel you really see and understand the part, then you can ask yourself this question. Knowing what you know now about how this part has been working hard for you, how do you feel towards this part? If you feel any kind of gratitude or appreciation in this process, then let the part know, because that's what they really long to hear. Throughout this process, just keep checking in with how you're feeling the part. Maybe there's a mental image of the part in relationship to you. And also checking in with how the part is responding to you. Sometimes the parts can start by being quite nervous or resistant to acknowledging your presence. But if you just persist in being interested without an agenda and spending time with the parts, you'll find that that really changes. So we'll talk a little bit about working with hurt parts now before we talk about how to close with parts. So hurt parts are different. As I mentioned, they're the parts that hold very strong emotions from our earliest years. And really what hurt parts need from us is to just be with them in their emotions and to understand what their world is like. If you imagine a very young part of you or a very young child who's experiencing extreme distress, probably a lot of loneliness, you just want to be with that child and just help that child to feel your calm presence and that you're okay with the child feeling exactly as it feels. So this is in particular where your presence anchor can come in extremely useful, because you do need to keep yourself in that calm, present state. When you're in that calm, present state, you can just ask the part very, very simple questions like, how are you now? Is there anything you want me to know about how it is to be you? How are you feeling? And just allow those feelings to arise in you and have the sense of being with this part. Many people get a mental image of being with a very young version of themselves. You can offer that part a cuddle. You can play with that part, just being really intuitive and open to what that part wants from you, what would feel good to that part. So you may not encounter a hurt part for quite some time in this process, because we all have many, many protectors. The creator of internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, estimates that the average healthy adult has between 35 and 50 parts. And most of these are protector parts, and they really try to stop us from feeling those hurt parts. So we may spend a long time working with protectors. That's great, that's really, really useful. So I'm now just going to talk about how to close with the parts that you've worked with, whether they're hurt parts or protector parts. So it can often be good to just check with the part if there's anything they'd like from you. They may be able to give you some quite wise guidance about the situation that you're involved in. Or they may just tell you, I'd like you to spend more time with me, or I'd like you to respect me for what I do. So just listening to those requests and then honestly answering whether you feel you can follow through on those requests or whether you have another offer to make, remembering that you are the wise parent here. And then before you leave the parts, just really thank them for everything they've shared with you, for the fact that they've trusted you enough to be in contact with you this time. And now we're going to take a little bit of a step back and just reflect on the process and what you've gained from it. So this is where a journal, again, might be really, really handy. You might want to note down the different parts that you've come into contact with, what you've learned about the parts of you, and then ask yourself, how does the situation look now that you have this additional information about your internal landscape? How does your decision look now? Do you still feel stuckness, or do you feel like you have some sense of the next step you can take? This is where you're really harvesting some of the benefits of that particular process you've just been on. So taking as much time there as you need, and remembering that you can come back to do this anytime you want, anytime you can find a bit of quiet time. Parts really benefit from building up relationships over time. And you may find that even in a daily practice of 10 or 15 minutes of just checking in, I often like to ask myself, which parts are here now, even if I'm not feeling any particular difficult way. And I often find some really surprising and insightful things are going on inside me that I wouldn't have known about if I didn't do this. So that brings us to the end of this parts work process. I hope you found the process supportive. To continue with your journey, you can use the free online guide. I'll post the link below. You can contact me if you'd like to discuss having one-to-one sessions. You can also look on my website where I post other resources. And you can sign up to my newsletter, Meaningful Mondays, where I talk about what feels true and useful to me, and I hope will be useful to you too. Thanks so much for journeying with me today.